Welcome to Midnight Rain Tales. The world sleeps, and the rain begins to whisper. In this quiet hour, stories drift through the night air, soft, chilling, unforgettable. Here, under the midnight sky, we share the tales the rain refuses to forget. Stay close and listen. The first time the van materialized on my street, a flicker against the familiar backdrop, I registered it merely as another shape in the periphery, automotive ephemera. By the third twilight vigil, however, a cold certainty had coiled in my gut. This was no transient presence. Little could I fathom how that unassuming steel shell would warp into the nucleus of a waking dread, consuming my days and nights, fraying the very fabric of my reason. My name is Alara. Until the leaves began their fiery descent a month prior, my existence was one of predictable cadence. A 32-year-old digital artist cocooned in a modest house nestled within the sleepy embrace of suburbia. My hours bled into pixels and projects. Evenings dissolved into the blue glow of screens or the low hum of conversation in dimly lit bars with friends. A simple tapestry, perhaps, but woven with threads of contentment that were entirely mine. Everything shifted on a Tuesday evening, deep into October's chill. Returning late from the studio, my thoughts a tangled mess of client revisions and looming deadlines. My headlights carved an arc across the asphalt, illuminating an unfamiliar bulk parked opposite my drive. A stark white panel van, anonymous utilitarian, the sort belonging to tradesmen or delivery fleets. A newcomer to the lane, a visitor calling on a neighbor. The thought evaporated as I crossed my threshold, prepared a solitary meal, and surrendered to routine. The following night, it reappeared. Same position, same encroaching dusk. Coincidence, my mind insisted, a stubborn refusal of the nascent unease. Yet later, poised for sleep, a glance through the bedroom window confirmed its steadfast presence. Was that a flicker of movement within its shadowed interior? A shiver traced my spine, involuntary. Paranoia, I chided myself, just shadows playing tricks. Night 3 shattered denial. The van loomed again, sentinel-like. This time, doubt dissolved. A silhouette was distinctly visible behind the wheel. I stood shrouded by my living room curtains, a sliver of vision framing the scene, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. Who lurked within? What purpose held them captive to my quiet street? The impulse to call the authorities warred with the sheer absurdity. There's a van parked outside. No crime, no overt threat, just a persistent, unnerving presence. And so I retreated, clinging to the fragile hope it would simply vanish with the dawn. It did not. Days bled into weeks, the van weaving itself into the texture of my life, an unwelcome constant. It often absented itself during daylight hours, a phantom retreating with the sun, only to faithfully reappear as shadows lengthened, sometimes directly opposite, sometimes displaced by a few houses, yet always maintaining an undeniable line of sight to my home. My routines began to contort under its invisible scrutiny, curtains drawn tight upon arrival, the front porch swing abandoned. Erratic departure and return times became a desperate strategy, a futile attempt to disrupt the watcher's rhythm. But the van remained, waiting, observing. Friends offered reassurances, platitudes meant to soothe. "It's nothing, Alara." Probably belongs to a contractor working nearby. Their words felt hollow. They hadn't witnessed the subtle repositioning when I dared to walk around the block, the unnerving synchronicity. They didn't carry the crushing weight of unseen eyes cataloging their every mundane act. I attempted documentation, a futile grasp for control. Phone snapshots captured its form, dates and times meticulously logged. But it parked with frustrating precision, always just beyond the range needed to decipher a license plate. Any attempt to bridge the distance, to confront the silence, was met with the quiet rumble of an engine firing to life, the van gliding away, only to inevitably reclaim its post hours later. The siege was internal, relentless. Sleep became a fractured landscape, startled awake by the groan of settling floorboards, the sigh of the wind. Bruised crescents bloomed beneath my eyes. My focus splintered, deadlines blurred, work suffered. A taut irritability settled over me. Friendships frayed under the strain of my inexplicable volatility. Then came the night, 3 weeks deep into this suffocating ritual, when the thread of my endurance snapped. 2 a.m. found me adrift in the restless dark, sleep an elusive shore. Suddenly, the sharp retort of a car door slamming shattered the stillness. Heart leaping into my throat, I flew to the window. The van, closer than ever, directly abutting my property line, and a figure was emerging. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. This was the culmination, the unspoken threat finally taking shape. My fingers, trembling uncontrollably, fumbled with my phone, dialing the emergency number. 911, what is your emergency? The voice was calm, distant. Someone's outside, I breathed, the words barely audible, terrified of being overheard. A van. They've been watching me for weeks. They're getting out. Ma'am, can you describe the person? Are they attempting entry? Peering through the glass again, a sliver of moonlight illuminated the scene. The figure stood motionless beside the vehicle, gaze fixed upon my house. No, just standing there. Please, send someone. I'm terrified. Understood, ma'am. Officers are en route. Stay on the line with me. Those ensuing moments stretched into an eternity. I remained crouched by the window, a prisoner in my own home, eyes locked on the silent silhouette outside, praying for the flashing herald of rescue. When the pulsing rhythm of blue and red finally painted the street, tears of sheer relief welled. 2 patrol cars glided to a halt. Officers moved swiftly, converging on the van and its lone occupant. Muffled voices carried on the night air, indistinct. After what felt like an age, one of the officers approached my door. Ma'am, Ilara, could you step outside, please? Hesitantly, I opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The figure by the van turned, and the breath caught in my chest. A woman, perhaps mid-40s, her face etched with an exhaustion that went bone deep, eyes haunted. Do you recognize this woman? The officer inquired gently. Confusion warred with lingering fear. I shook my head. No, never. But that van, it's been here, watching. The woman spoke then, her voice fragile, laced with tremor. I am so profoundly sorry. I never intended to frighten you. It's just the resemblance to my Clara. The officer quietly filled the void, The woman's name was Martha. Her daughter Clara had vanished 2 years prior. Clara, who apparently shared my features, my build, had last been seen somewhere in this very vicinity. Martha, consumed by a desperate hope, had been circling these streets, night after desolate night, scanning faces, searching for any echo, any trace of her lost girl. I stood there, suspended in disbelief. The object of my weeks-long terror, the source of my spiraling paranoia, was a mother drowning in grief. The wave of relief that washed over me was swiftly overtaken by a profound, aching sorrow. "I'm so sorry," I managed, the words feeling inadequate. "I didn't know, I thought—" My voice trailed off. Martha nodded, tears finally spilling, silver tracks on her weary face. "I understand. I should have approached you, explained. I was just terrified of extinguishing the last embers of hope." Statements were taken, formalities observed. The officers, with professional kindness, informed Martha that her nightly vigils, however understandable, were causing distress and couldn't continue. They provided numbers, resources, pathways toward support for families adrift in the same agonizing limbo. As Martha prepared to leave, an impulse I hadn't anticipated moved me. I stepped forward and embraced her. She stiffened, a brief moment of surprise before collapsing into the hug, quiet sobs shaking her frame. "I hope you find her," I whispered against her hair. The white van never haunted my street again, yet the experience inscribed itself onto my psyche. Weeks spent submerged in fear, constructing threats from shadows, projecting menace onto silence, and beneath it all lay the raw, unvarnished truth of a parent's heartbreak, a desperate pilgrimage fueled by love and loss. Thoughts of Martha and Clara became frequent visitors in my quiet moments. I even found myself attending a meeting of the support group. The police had mentioned scanning the faces, hoping perhaps to see her there. She never attended, but listening to the interwoven narratives of loss and resilience shifted my own experience into a different light. My nightmare, it transpired, was merely the reflection of someone else's enduring tragedy. It was a stark lesson in the deceptive nature of perception, the insidious power of fear to warp reality. But it was also a testament to the staggering depth of parental devotion, the extraordinary lengths traversed in the faintest hope of reunion. I still reside in the same house, on the same ostensibly quiet street. But now, when darkness falls and I gaze out my window, I no longer scan for threats lurking just beyond the light. Instead, I see a world teeming with hidden stories, some terrifying, some steeped in sorrow, all profoundly, achingly human. And I am reminded that sometimes the thing we dread most is simply another's pain, searching blindly for solace. Silas arrived under a leaden Monday sky, the farmhouse emerging from the gloom like a weathered knucklebone. Wind pressed down like a damp shroud as he killed the engine. 2 duffels occupied the passenger seat. A laptop case was slung across his chest. Before disturbing the car's contents, he circled the structure, a slow appraisal of its decay. Paint peeled in leprous patches from timbers cracked near the window frames. The front porch sagged, its boards loose. A single step canted awkwardly. Beyond lay fields of unruly grass, hemmed by dilapidated fencing. A scattering of skeletal trees clawed at the horizon, and out there, impaled in the earth, stood 3 scarecrows, their straw visages angled towards some unseen vanishing point. He registered their presence, 3 sentinels widely spaced, without particular alarm. Mere effigies. He'd come for the quiet, a sanctuary for writing, not for communion with the uncanny. That evening, bags hauled inside, he surveyed his temporary domain. Spartan. A diminutive living room offered a couch, a lone armchair, a low table. To the right, the kitchen. An aged refrigerator hummed dissonantly beside a gas stove. The single bedroom felt like a closet, barely containing its narrow bed and dresser. In the bathroom, the sink faucet sputtered indignantly when tested. He moved through the rooms, flicking switches. Bulbs flickered into life or emitted a low, buzzing complaint. Floorboards groaned underfoot. Hinges whined their protests. An aroma of old wood, persistently damp, permeated everything, a scent he chose to dismiss as he set up his laptop on the kitchen table, arranging his notes like talismans against the encroaching solitude. Later, as twilight bled across the landscape, he returned to the porch, leaning against the railing. Its surface felt rough, splintered beneath his palm. He scanned the fields, seeking deviation in the descending darkness. Initially, only stillness reigned. Grasses rippled faintly. The scarecrows maintained their distant vigil, unmoving. No sound intruded save the dry rustle of unseen leaves. Deep into the night, the rhythm of his typing faltered. A creak intruded. He froze, listening. From the front porch, the distinct protest of a loose board under weight, yet peering through the window revealed only emptiness. The porch lay vacant beneath a clear, windless sky. He remained watchful. Minutes passed. Again the wood groaned, an impossible sound in the absolute stillness. Slowly, deliberately, he opened the door, scanned the weathered planks. No footprints marred the dusty surface. No presence lingered. He retreated, securing the lock. Resettling at the table, another sound pricked his awareness. A faint, rhythmic dripping. He rose, tracking it to the kitchen. The sink was dry. He checked the bathroom. Basin and shower yielded nothing. Outside, no rain fell. He craned his neck, examining the ceiling for stains, finding none. Still, the insistent drip, drip, drip persisted, seeming to emanate from within the very walls. Cabinets were opened, corners inspected, ears pressed near the floorboards. The source remained elusive, a phantom beat within the house's hollow bones. Exhausted, he abandoned the search, attempting to submerge the sound beneath the clatter of keys. Sleep offered little refuge. The bed proved unyielding, sleep fragmented. More than once, phantom steps echoed outside, but investigation revealed nothing. Morning found him stepping onto the dew-slicked grass for a clearer view. The scarecrows, they had shifted. He recalled distinctly their posture the previous evening, facing outwards towards the fields. Now one stared directly at the farmhouse, another angled towards the dirt road. The third bowed its head as if in contemplation. A frown tightened Silas's features. He walked towards them, traversing the uneven ground. Up close, they were crudely fashioned things, worn garments bulging with straw, hats tugged low. He reached out, touched one. Old fabric, desiccated stuffing. No tangible proof of movement existed, yet certainty settled in his gut. They had not stood thus before. He dedicated the afternoon to writing, leaving the front door ajar, a chair wedged beneath the knob for swift egress should sounds demand investigation. Around noon, a low resonance drifted from the fields. Not a voice, but something akin to a profound sigh or a deep, guttural hum. He pushed the door wider, stepped onto the porch. The tall grasses swayed with an unnatural vigor, bending and rising as if something vast and unseen disturbed them from below, though no breeze stirred the air sufficiently. Squinting, he could discern no definite shape, only the unsettling ripple passing through the vegetation. The scarecrows remained, inanimate figures scattered across the vista, yet one seemed to lean now at a peculiar angle. Drawn by an uneasy curiosity, he ventured closer. A few feet away, the air grew abruptly colder, raising gooseflesh on his arms. The scarecrow's head seemed minutely turned, regarding him. Had it been so a moment prior? He couldn't be sure. He nudged it. The figure remained firmly staked. Retreating, he sought the dubious sanctuary of the house. Evening descended, and with it, a renewed effort to immerse himself in work, to ignore the house's unsettling repertoire. A few pages materialized before the familiar sounds returned. First, the porch creaked its familiar lament. Then, a faint, hesitant tapping against the door itself. Through the window glass, his own reflection stared back, superimposed on the deepening dusk. Beyond, near the fence line, a silhouette materialized. Too distant for detail, it possessed an unsettling bulk, larger than a man, hunched, with arms that seemed unnaturally long. It slid between the skeletal trees and vanished. Silas remained rooted, watching the space it had occupied. It did not reappear. Later, ensconced in the living room's meager light, a presence manifested at the glass door leading to the back. A face pressed close. Silas recoiled, nearly tumbling from his chair, pale, indistinctly translucent, its features blurred like condensation on a cold pane. The bare suggestion of eyes, a mouth. It lingered for a heartbeat, then dissolved, leaving only a fleeting patch of mist that vanished almost instantly. He scrambled to the door, wrenching it open. Nothing. He stepped onto the small back stoop, scanning the silent yard. Still grass. Undisturbed dirt. The night held its breath. He slammed the door, the sound unnaturally loud, and fumbled with the lock. Sleep was a distant prospect, the internal dripping a maddening metronome. Around midnight, flashlight beam cutting the darkness, he prowled the house again. Every corner scrutinized, every closet invaded. He thumped the walls, listening intently. The dripping neither intensified nor faded, maintaining its steady, inexplicable cadence. No damp patches, no puddles materialized. Defeated, he returned to the cramped bed, tossing, turning, the night punctuated by faint footfalls outside, the porch's recurrent groans, and once a sound like heavy cloth scraping against wood, followed by a low groan, less human than the protest of stressed timber. Dawn arrived, pale and uncertain. He checked the scarecrows immediately. One had migrated. It now stood alarmingly close to the house, beside an old fence post perhaps 20 yards from his front porch. Its straw head seemed tilted upwards, fixing its vacant gaze upon him. A knot formed in Silas's stomach. He stared, then marched towards it. It felt unchanged. Dry straw, old clothes, the unyielding stake anchoring it. He gripped its shoulder, attempting to wrench it free. It held fast, mocking his strength. Frustrated, heart hammering, he retreated inside, pacing the creaking floorboards. A plan formed, born of desperation. He positioned his phone in the front window, angled to capture the fields, initiating a video recording. Tonight he would have proof. Chairs and the small table became makeshift barricades against the doors. Windows were double-checked, latched tight. Then he sat in the dim living room waiting, a tremor in his hands, his breath shallow. The porch creaked. He snatched the flashlight, aiming its beam through the window. Planks dipped slightly, flexing under invisible weight. Nothing visible occupied them. A scraping sound commenced along the exterior wall, like fingernails dragged across wood, though no branches reached the house. He moved to check the back door. The pale face reappeared, pressed against the glass. It lingered longer this time. Hollow sockets, a thin slash suggesting a nose, a closed mouth, empty shapes coalescing into a spectral visage. The hairs on his arms prickled, his pulse roared. He aimed the flashlight directly at it. The face remained impassive, cold glass its only barrier. "Who's there?" he yelled, voice cracking. No response. He pressed his hand flat against the door. The glass felt unnaturally cold. Abruptly it vanished. He flung the door open. Emptiness. Silence. He slammed it shut again. He reached for his phone to call someone, anyone. No signal. Cursing, he stepped outside, holding the device aloft near his car. Still nothing. The fields lay quiescent under the moonlight. The scarecrows seemed to have receded into the distance. The hunched figure was nowhere to be seen. No fresh footprints disturbed the ground. A ragged breath escaped him. He resolved to wait out the remaining darkness, awake. Back in the living room, sipping water, he listened. The dripping waxed and waned, sometimes seeming intimately close, other times fading to a barely perceptible tick. Around 3, the deep sigh returned from the fields, long and resonant. Peering out, he saw the grass shifting again, undulating in waves that rolled towards the house, then receded. No discernible form, only the eerie, rhythmic motion. He checked the phone's recording. Static images. The scarecrows stood motionless in their designated spots. The fields looked barren. He replayed the footage, scrutinizing every frame. Nothing. Frustration warred with exhaustion. His head throbbed. Daylight, he decided, was essential for clarity. Morning. He walked the property perimeter, shoes soaked with dew. The scarecrows occupied their previous positions, yet subtle alterations nagged at him. An arm angled higher, a hat tilted differently. Touching them yielded only the familiar sensation of straw and cloth. He inspected the fence line, the silent trees, the ground, soft in patches, firm elsewhere. No tracks. The porch steps were undisturbed. Beneath the porch, only dirt, cobwebs, decaying leaves. The following day became a forensic examination of the farmhouse itself. Every closet, drawer, and cabinet surrendered its contents. Old tools, cleaning remnants, moth-eaten blankets, mundane artifacts. The dripping persisted, mocking his efforts even after he located and shut off the main water valve. He pounded the walls, raising dust, but no answers. A foray into the attic revealed only empty space, dry floorboards, ancient boxes, no sign of leaks. The fourth night brought a few hours of troubled sleep. Midnight jolted him awake, drenched in sweat. He sat bolt upright, listening. The porch creaked again, rhythmically now, like pacing footsteps. Silently, he crept to the window. The boards dipped and rose in a slow, deliberate pattern. Invisible feet trod the planks. He shone the flashlight. The movement ceased instantly. He switched it off. A pause, then the creaking resumed. A game of unseen torment. A tightness constricted his chest. Jaw clenched, he retreated from the window, remaining inside. Later, movement flickered at the edge of his vision, near the fence line. The hunched shape. It darted between two trees, long legs moving swiftly, arms swinging low. Utterly silent, Silas swallowed hard, holding his breath behind the glass, a captive audience. It moved back and forth several times before melting into the deeper darkness. He must have dozed on the couch. Waking abruptly, he found sunlight slanting through the dusty windows. The air felt thick, stale. He pushed open the front door and stepped onto the porch. The scarecrow that had stood closest was gone. Only the empty stake remained, thrusting from the earth. He walked to it. No straw fragments littered the ground, no scraps of fabric. Turning, he scanned the fields, his gaze sweeping the perimeter. He spotted it then, near the far edge of the property, reunited with the other two. 3 figures now stood together, a grim triptych. All faced the farmhouse. All wore their hats low, arms stiffly at their sides. A tremor ran through him. His legs felt unsteady. The decision was instantaneous. Pack. He no longer cared about the writing, only escape. Clothes were thrown haphazardly into bags, the laptop snatched up. He locked the door behind him, the click echoing in the sudden silence. At the car, loading his meager possessions, he cast one final look across the fields. Nothing stirred. The scarecrows stood like monuments to stillness. The grass lay quiet. The porch remained vacant. No dripping sound reached his ears. The windows were blank eyes reflecting the morning sky. He slid into the driver's seat, the engine catching with a reassuring roar. He pulled away, watching the farmhouse diminish in the rearview mirror, eyes scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. Nothing. He left it all behind. The groaning boards, the phantom drip, the shifting effigies, the silent faces pressed against cold glass. Miles down the road, his phone chimed, signal bars reappearing. He didn't make a call. He just drove, gaze fixed forward, refusing to look back, hands gripping the wheel, banishing the memory of slow creaks, icy glass, and the soft, profound sighs carried on the empty air of the fields. Midday sun sliced through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the sharp beams, just as Elias maneuvered the antiquated mirror into the living room corner. He recalled the specific angle of light because he'd just wrestled the furniture into a new configuration. The mirror itself was a relic. Its timber frame, desiccated and fragile, showed fissures like aged skin. An aroma clung to it, faint, evocative of dust and time-locked textiles, the scent of forgotten things tucked away in dim closets. He'd claimed it from a cluttered second-hand shop 2 days prior, envisioning it might banish the corner's emptiness, lend the room an illusion of spaciousness, perhaps even amplify the light. He could not have been more profoundly mistaken. Almost immediately, he positioned himself before it. His likeness materialized within the glass, framed by the familiar contours of his living space, the worn settee, the low table, the patterned rug, the doorway yawning towards the hall. The reflection seemed utterly ordinary for a fleeting instant, Yet an intangible wrongness prickled beneath the surface. Elias studied his own countenance. He offered a tentative smile. He anticipated its echo in the glass. Instead, the visage staring back remained taut, severe. The eyes within the mirror refused the crinkling crescent of a grin. They held steady, calm, unnervingly resolute. A peculiar pressure tightened in his chest. His smile faltered, then vanished. He waited, scrutinizing the mirrored Elias again, this time adopting a neutral mask. Then, subtly, the reflection's lips quirked upwards, a phantom smile bestowed upon him. Quiet, measured, almost secretive. He arched his brows. The image did not follow suit. He tightened his jawline. The reflection's jaw remained slack. A rigidity crept up his spine. His arms felt like leaden weights at his sides. He attempted another expression, something uncomplicated. A lift at one corner of his mouth, expecting the mirrored equivalent. Nothing stirred in the glass. He edged closer. His reflection stubbornly held its ground, refusing the advance, as if anchored to a previous moment in time, detached from his present reality. Leaning forward until mere inches separated his face from the cool plane, he perceived the faint network of scratches marring the mirror's aged surface. His gaze flickered, searching the eyes of his counterpart. They met his stare directly, unwavering. Then a minuscule tremor disturbed the reflection's eyelid. Elias blinked. The figure in the glass did not. His stomach constricted. No rational explanation accounted for such behavior from a simple reflection. Slowly, deliberately, he extended an index finger, touching the glass. It felt cool, impeccably smooth beneath his fingertip. His reflection mirrored the action precisely, simultaneously, fingertips aligning in a perfect, almost mocking convergence. Yet, as he withdrew his hand, he observed the reflection's expression morph independently once more. It looked amused. Elias felt no amusement, only a dry friction in his throat as he swallowed. He vacated the room, returning minutes later, clinging to the hope of self-deception. Minds conjure strange illusions under fatigue or distraction, he reasoned. But upon re-entering the living room, the discrepancy persisted. He stood utterly motionless before the mirror, composing his features into stillness. The reflection's face shifted nonetheless. The corners of its mouth dipped slightly, a subtle downturn as though probing his reaction, waiting. Abruptly, Elias flung his right hand upward, testing for lag. This time, the reflection raised its left hand, not a mirror image, but a distinct entity mimicking him with a delay, introducing subtle deviations. A sharp exhalation escaped him. He felt the dampness of sweat bloom on the nape of his neck. He tried speaking, a murmured word barely audible. The reflection's mouth opened only after. His voice ceased, poised as if to reply, yet silence prevailed. He pressed a hand to his chest, acutely aware of his accelerating pulse, the thudding resonating in his ears. For a while he attempted to disregard it, sinking onto the settee at an angle that kept the mirror peripherally visible. He watched it from the corner of his eye. The reflection remained oriented towards him. From his vantage point, it should have presented a profile, yet it stared forward, as if its head had swiveled on an unseen neck to maintain focus on him. Rising again, he approached the glass. He lifted his arms, rotating his shoulders, observing. The reflection remained inert. After a pregnant pause, the mirrored figure raised its own hand. index finger extended, pointing towards the wall directly behind Elias. He pivoted. Nothing remarkable met his gaze, merely an expanse of plain, white-painted plasterboard. Turning back, he found the reflection repeating the gesture insistently. It indicated the same spot on the wall, roughly shoulder height. It continued pointing, face impassive, eyes locked onto his. Elias went to the designated spot. His fingers brushed the paint. It felt ordinary. He tapped it with a fingernail. Solid. Returning his gaze to the mirror, he saw the reflection offer a slow, deliberate nod before resuming its stillness. He faced the wall again, pressing harder with his fingertip. Seconds later, he detected a subtle unevenness beneath the paint, a minuscule elevation, as if a layer concealed something beneath. He scraped tentatively with his nail. A flake of white paint detached. Beneath it, a faint line emerged, suggesting a mark made upon the wall before the final coat was applied. From a kitchen drawer, he retrieved a flathead screwdriver. Returning, he began scratching at the wall with more purpose. Paint particles showered the baseboard and floor. Within minutes, he'd exposed a small patch of cryptic symbols, seemingly etched into the wall's surface itself. They resembled no alphabet he knew. Small, sharp strokes and curves, arranged in rows, some interconnected by thin filaments. He continued scraping, enlarging the revealed area. The patterns grew in complexity the more he uncovered. In places, shallow carvings depicted shapes reminiscent of contorted faces or figures with a disturbing excess of limbs. His hands began to tremble. His own breathing sounded unnaturally loud, amplified by the room's quiet tension, punctuated only by the grating scrape of the screwdriver tip. He risked a glance at the mirror. The reflection now wore a broad, unsettling smile. A wave of nausea washed over him. He rubbed the back of his neck, slick with perspiration. Steeling himself against the rising panic, he persisted with the scraping until an area roughly the size of a dinner plate lay exposed. The symbols and figures formed a dense, intricate cluster. He traced them with his fingertips. The carvings felt coarse, abrasive. He noticed tiny flecks of a different material embedded within the lines. Perhaps old plaster fragments or some sort of filler. The very air in the room seemed to acquire weight, thickened by a faint, loamy odor like disturbed earth or damp stone. Turning back to the mirror, Elias found the smile still fixed upon the reflection's face. He mouthed a silent question. "What do you want?" The reflection responded by slowly raising both hands, palms facing outward, a gesture seemingly imploring him to halt. He straightened up, taking a step back from the marred wall. He stared at the symbols again. They remained utterly indecipherable. A soft creak emanated from somewhere nearby, perhaps the mirror's old frame settling. He waited. Then the reflection stirred once more. This time, one hand moved in a slow circle, gesturing towards the symbols on the wall. It appeared to desire something further from him regarding them. Perhaps more paint removal. Perhaps breaching the wall itself. A knot formed deep in his gut. His throat felt parched. The prospect of intentionally damaging his own wall was deeply unappealing, yet the idea of ignoring the mirror's silent insistence felt equally fraught with peril. Its behavior carried the weight of a directive, or perhaps a warning. He walked back to the kitchen, returning with a small hammer and a chisel. his hands now visibly shaking. Positioned before the wall, he placed the chisel's sharp edge against one of the thicker carved lines and tapped it gently with the hammer. Plaster spiderweb then crumbled. He chipped away a small piece, revealing a darker substance beneath. Older plaster, perhaps, or wood. He worked meticulously, chipping cautiously, trying to minimize the destruction, acutely aware of the sweat trickling down his temples. Every sound seemed magnified: the hammer's tap, the plaster's brittle crackle, his own ragged breaths. Glancing over his shoulder towards the corner, he saw the reflection observing him intently, head tilted slightly. As he managed to create an aperture large enough to peer through, he noticed more symbols etched into whatever lay beneath the plaster layer. It looked like aged wood paneling. Faint lines, possibly drawn or pyrographed, marked its surface. Pressing his face close, he aimed the beam of a flashlight he'd retrieved earlier into the void. The light illuminated a hollow space behind the wall, containing scraps of insulation and old timber framing. And there, on one of the structural beams, scratched into the wood grain, was another cluster of those uncanny symbols, smaller and fainter than those on the surface. His stomach clenched violently. He turned back to the mirror. The reflection stared, impassive. He registered his own pallor in the glass. The reflection, by contrast, looked disturbingly serene. A chilling realization dawned. He hadn't witnessed a single flicker of fear or confusion in its expression, only deliberate, controlled displays as if manipulated by an unseen puppeteer. He rubbed the side of his face, his jaw aching with tension. He tried speaking again, louder this time. "What do you want?" The reflection offered no vocal response. Instead, it pressed a single finger to its lips in a clear admonition of silence. Elias clamped his mouth shut, feeling his pulse hammer in his throat. The meaning of the symbols remained elusive. A powerful urge arose to conceal them again, to patch the wall, return the mirror to the obscurity from which it came, pretend none of this had occurred. Yet the reflection's quiet insistence held him captive. He widened the hole in the wall and reached inside, his hand brushing against the rough texture of the wooden beam. His fingertips traced the irregular carvings, feeling sharp edges and uneven depths, as though gouged by a crude tool. Who had done this, and why? A faint vibration pulsed against his skin, perhaps just his own frayed nerves. He withdrew his hand, flexing stiff fingers. He turned back to the mirror, planting himself directly before it. He attempted to match the reflection's neutrality. His own face remained impassive. The reflection frowned. Elias mirrored the frown. The reflection's frown deepened into a scowl. He tried a smile. The reflection's features hardened, resisting synchronicity. He stepped closer still, examining the minute details reflected back. The pores of his skin, the emerging stubble, a faint scar above his eyebrow. The mirror rendered them faithfully, yet the image moved when he was still. He slowly raised his left hand. The reflection raised its right, a perfect anatomical opposition, behaving less like a reflection and more like another being standing on the other side of the glass. He stood there for a long interval, simply breathing, watching. The peculiar smell in the room intensified, now distinctly reminiscent of old, sodden wood. His gaze drifted to the wall again. The ragged hole, the exposed layers, the cryptic markings. He considered calling someone, anyone, but the thought brought a fresh wave of unease. Explaining this situation, the mirror's aberrant sentience, felt impossible, humiliating. He paced the confines of the living room, casting intermittent glances towards the corner. Each time the reflection's expression seemed subtly altered, now inquisitive, now impatient. He fought to quell the rising tide of anxiety, attempting to focus on mundane actions like tidying the scattered tools, but normalcy felt irrevocably fractured. As dusk began to bleed through the windows, painting the room in deepening shades of gray, the reflection dimmed accordingly. He switched on a floor lamp, its warm glow illuminating one side of the mirror's frame. The figure within seemed indifferent to the artificial light, its strange autonomy unbroken. Elias resolved to halt his excavation of the wall for the time being. The prospect of further damage or uncovering something even more disturbing was daunting. For now he simply stood, a silent observer caught between the enigmatic mirror, its disquieting occupant, and the cryptic symbols scarred into the hidden heart of his home. He remained uncertain of the next step, uncertain of the reason behind any of it, suspended in a state of profound unease. Roadside inns held a particular kind of dread for Elias, monuments to transience and stale regrets. Yet fatigue had ground his reservations to dust. Miles bled into an indistinct smear behind eyelids, gritty with exhaustion, his focus fraying at the edges. When a skeletal neon buzzard flickered erratically into life beside the desolate highway, the Hollow Reed Motel, surrender felt less like a choice and more like an inevitability. He veered onto the cracked asphalt, aiming for oblivion, even a temporary, threadbare version. Its name was a cruel irony. Not a single reed, hollow or otherwise, graced the barren patch of land surrounding the structure. The sign itself was a study in decay, letters missing, the remaining glow weak and sputtering. Below, the parking lot stretched out, a vacant expanse punctuated only by a pair of rust-pocked vehicles that looked permanently fused to the tarmac. This place breathed neglect, exhaling an air of long-abandoned hope, a warning Elias, in his profound weariness, chose to ignore. He wrestled his duffel from the back seat and trudged towards the dim square of light-marked office. The air inside hung thick, a tapestry woven from damp plaster, stale coffee, and the ghosts of forgotten cigarettes. Behind a scarred counter presided a man seemingly carved from petrified wood, his age indeterminate beneath a pallor like old parchment. Spectacles magnified his eyes into unsettlingly large watery orbs that swam behind the thick lenses as they lifted to regard Elias. "A room," Elias rasped, the words scraping his throat. Without preamble, a registration card slid across the counter's worn surface. Elias scribbled the required details, his signature a fleeting mark on the motel's indifferent history, then pushed it back. The proprietor studied the form for a long, silent beat, his magnified eyes scanning the ink before producing a key. It was tethered to a weighty brass fob shaped like a stylized cattail, its surface smooth from countless hands. Room 11. His voice was a dry rustle, like leaves skittering over concrete. Top floor, far end, vacate by 10. Right, Elias muttered, already pivoting towards the exit, the heavy key cool in his palm. The ascent was a symphony of groans, each wooden stair protesting Elias's weight beneath the threadbare runner. The upper corridor stretched before him, a tunnel papered in faded optimism, some long-forgotten floral pattern, now peeling back in strips to reveal darker truths beneath. The carpet, a relic of forgotten decades, clung grimly to the floorboards, worn to threads in spectral pathways leading past numbered doors. Room 11 yielded with a reluctant click of the lock. Inside, the air was stagnant, heavy with the phantom scent of nicotine and something else, something cloying and vaguely sweet beneath the chemical tang of cheap cleaner. A bed dominated the small space, swathed in a coverlet patterned with aggressive faded blooms. A squat television perched precariously on a faux wood dresser opposite. Mundane, expected, exhaustion trumped fastidiousness. Elias dropped his duffel, the thud muffled by the worn carpet. He secured the deadbolt, a flimsy shield against the world, and fell onto the bedspread, the world dissolving into darkness before he even considered the dubious state of the sheets beneath. He surfaced abruptly from sleep's depths into a suffocating blackness, the only anchor the asthmatic wheeze of the window air conditioner rattling in its frame. Time felt disjointed, elastic. His watch face glowed faintly. 1:13 a.m. Barely an hour had passed, yet it felt like an age submerged. As he shifted, seeking the receding shores of sleep, a sound intruded upon the mechanical drone. Tap, tap. A pause pregnant with silence. Tap, tap, tap. It emanated from the wall directly behind the headboard. A soft percussion, methodical, unnervingly patient. Old plumbing, perhaps? The building settling its ancient bones? Elias tried to rationalize, grasping at mundane explanations, but the rhythm felt too intentional, too measured. A current of disquiet, cold and sharp, traced its way up his spine. He lay rigid, straining his ears, the sound a tiny, insistent drumbeat against the vast silence of the night. Minutes stretched, marked only by the persistent cadence. Enough. Elias swung his legs out of bed, the floral spread rustling like dry leaves under his movement. He crossed the small space, the worn carpet absorbing his footsteps, and pressed his ear flat against the cool, papery wallpaper where the sound had seemed strongest. He held his breath, listening for anything. A muffled voice, movement, the scrape of a chair from the adjacent room. Nothing. Only the thrumming silence where the tapping had abruptly ceased. He pulled back, his own heartbeat suddenly loud in his ears, a frantic counterpoint to the quiet. A nervous chuckle escaped him, thin and unconvincing in the stale air. Just thin walls, he told himself. An old structure breathing in the night. He was letting the isolation, the inherent creepiness of the place, gnaw at him. He retreated to the dubious sanctuary of the bed, pulling the covers close, though they offered little comfort. Sleep hovered, a tantalizing mirage, just beyond the reach of his jangled nerves. Then it came again, sharper this time, more insistent. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. Not from the wall, from the door. Elias bolted upright, his heart slamming against his ribs like a trapped bird. He fumbled for the bedside lamp, flooding the dismal room with weak, yellow light that seemed only to deepen the shadows in the corners. His gaze locked onto the door, that flimsy barrier of wood and peeling paint. "Hello?" The word emerged as a tremor, swallowed instantly by the room's dead air. Silence answered. Utter, profound, unnerving silence. Every nerve ending screamed caution. He rose from the bed, moving with a stealth born of burgeoning fear, and crept towards the door. Ear pressed against the wood, he listened intently. No shuffle of feet in the corridor, no muffled breathing, no indication of presence whatsoever beyond the panels. He waited, breath held captive in his chest, his hand hovering inches from the deadbolt's tarnished brass knob. A primal warning, cold and clear, resonated deep within him. Do not open this door. He recoiled as if the wood itself carried a charge, backing away slowly until the edge of the bed met the back of his legs. He sank onto it, his mind racing through possibilities. A prank? Some drunken guest mistaking the room? The ancient proprietor making unsettlingly silent rounds? The explanations felt flimsy, inadequate defenses against the rising tide of visceral dread. And then the sound shifted location once more. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. Coming now, impossibly, from the window. Elias froze, ice flooding his veins. The thin, sallow curtains offered little concealment from the night outside. Through the translucent fabric silhouetted against the faint, pre-dawn gloom, or perhaps just the deeper darkness beyond the glass, stood a form. Indistinct, merely a suggestion of height and presence, utterly still save for the measured, rhythmic tapping of something. A finger, a branch, against the glass pane. It was watching, waiting. The sound, persistent and soft, drilled into Elias's consciousness. Each tap a tiny hammer blow against his sanity. A profound chill seized him, radiating outwards from his core, his hands beginning to tremble uncontrollably. He was rooted to the spot, trapped between the dubious safety of the bed and the unnerving tableau at the window, his gaze locked on that unwavering, patient silhouette. A monumental effort of will propelled him backward, his legs threatening to buckle beneath him. He stumbled away from the window's silent sentinel, retreating across the room towards the relative darkness of the bathroom alcove. His hand, slick with cold sweat, fumbled with the knob before finding the lock on the inside. He clicked it shut, leaning heavily against the door, the cheap wood cool and solid against his back. His heart hammered a frantic, painful rhythm against his ribs. "It's just someone messing around," he chanted silently, desperately, the words a flimsy mantra against the encroaching terror. Just a stupid prank, but the tapping persisted, audible even through the closed door, soft, methodical, inescapable. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. Time lost all meaning, stretching into an eternity measured only by that maddening, patient sound. Each repetition tightening the knot of fear in his gut. Then, as abruptly as it began, silence fell. A heavy, expectant quiet that felt somehow more threatening than the tapping itself. Elias remained pressed against the door, straining to hear anything beyond the frantic pulse drumming in his ears. Minutes crawled by, thick and slow. Hesitantly, cautiously, he turned the lock and eased the bathroom door open just a crack. The main room lay undisturbed, bathed in the sickly lamplight, empty. He moved silently towards the window, his hand trembling as he reached for the curtain's edge. He pulled it back a fraction, peering out. Nothing. The cracked asphalt of the parking lot lay empty beneath the bruised light of impending dawn, his car the lone sentinel in the gray expanse. A wave of shaky relief washed over him, potent but fleeting. He let the curtain fall back into place, obscuring the view. Sleep was now an impossibility, a forgotten country. Elias returned to the bed but didn't lie down. He sat on the edge, rigid, watching the shadows in the room retreat as the sky outside bled from black to bruised purple, then to a pale, indifferent gray. He listened to the silence, every creak of the old building amplified, every distant groan of plumbing sounding like a prelude, waiting for the tapping to resume. It never did. With the first true rays of watery sunlight piercing the gap in the curtains, he gathered his belongings with frantic haste, movements jerky and uncoordinated. He didn't pause at the office, didn't risk another encounter with the proprietor's unsettling gaze, didn't glance towards the darkened window of that office. He flung his duffel into the passenger seat, slid behind the wheel, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turning over felt like a small victory. He drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his gaze fixed firmly on the ribbon of highway unfolding ahead, carrying him away from the Hollow Reed Motel and the oppressive weight of its silence. What vigil had been kept outside his window? What unseen presence had drummed its patient, rhythmic message against glass and wood and wall? He couldn't fathom, nor did he wish to. He knew only the visceral, bone-deep certainty that some thresholds, once crossed in desperation, are best left undisturbed forever. The allure of cheap roadside slumber had curdled, definitively and permanently, into a lasting phobia. A brittle retort from the undergrowth, perhaps a foraging deer. The second snap, sharper, closer, a fox maybe, but the third, a resonant crack, followed by a low guttural rumble that vibrated in my chest cavity. That was the moment our family pilgrimage into wilderness twisted into a primal struggle for existence. My name is Elias. For years, these excursions into the wild were my family's sacrament. Clara, my wife, and our children Lily, all of 10 summers, and Finn, barely 8, anticipated our annual immersion in nature's embrace. This time, we'd sought profound isolation in the Adirondacks, a sanctuary woven deep into the mountains, leagues from any town, beyond the reach of signal towers. It was meant as an antidote to the frantic pulse of modern life. It became instead a phantasm etched forever onto my memory. The day had unfurled with deceptive perfection. We'd trekked to our chosen haven, erected our canvas shelter, and lost ourselves, exploring the sun-dappled woods. As twilight bled across the sky, we congregated around the crackling fire, charring marshmallows, spinning tales. The children's laughter mingled with the wood smoke. Constellations emerged like scattered diamonds, and for a fleeting interlude, the world felt utterly, profoundly balanced. Just past the witching hour, I heard it first. A disturbance in the dense foliage, a weight and deliberation that belied the movements of common woodland creatures. I straightened, every nerve singing, my gaze probing the impenetrable blackness beyond the firelight's frail perimeter. "What is it, love?" Clara murmured, sensing the sudden tautness in my posture. A strained smile. "Likely nothing, just going to investigate." Retrieving our torch, I rose, casting its beam into the whispering trees. The light snagged on twin points of reflection, eyes that gleamed for an instant before vanishing back into the void. "Papa?" Lily's voice small and tremulous. "What's out there?" "Just forest dwellers, sweetheart," I managed, striving for a placid tone. "Nothing to fear. Why don't you and Finn get tucked in?" While Clara guided the children towards the tent, I executed another sweep of the campsite's edge. All appeared undisturbed, yet the sensation of being observed, a prickling awareness on my skin, refused to dissipate. We all retreated into the tent, but slumber remained a distant shore. Each twig's fracture, each sigh of leaves under an unseen pressure amplified my unease. The children eventually succumbed to exhaustion, but Clara and I lay vigilant, suspended in the listening dark. Around 2, the sound became unmistakable, footfalls circling our frail shelter, heavy, rhythmic treads no four-legged beast would make. Clara's hand found mine, her grip convulsive. "Elias," she breathed, her voice frayed with terror. "What do we do?" Before thought could form into words, a vast shadow eclipsed the tent wall. Something immense stood just outside, its form silhouetted against the thin nylon. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat I felt certain the entity could perceive. Then, abruptly, an unearthly ululation tore through the night's fabric. Part lupine howl, part something alien and terrifying. The children jolted awake, Finn emitting a choked whimper. "Shh," I urged, drawing them fiercely close. "Absolute silence." The shadow shifted, resuming its circuit. We heard sniffing, sharp inhalations testing the air, hunting our scent. Then stillness descended. A long, agonizing moment stretched, each of us holding our breath, poised on the precipice of... What? Suddenly claws, thick and sharp, raked down the tent's side, fabric ripping with a sound like tearing flesh. Lily screamed, shattering the tension, and chaos erupted. I snatched the torch, aiming its beam through the fresh rent. For a heart-stopping fraction of a second, I saw it. A form reminiscent of a wolf, yet grotesquely magnified, its eyes burning with an unnatural sulfuric yellow. "Run!" The command ripped from my throat as I tore at the zipper. We spilled out into the nocturnal chill, the cold air a physical blow. I swept Finn into my arms, Clara seized Lily's hand, and we plunged headlong into the labyrinthine woods. Behind us, the creature's snarls pursued, punctuated by the heavy thud of its pursuit. My thoughts scrambled, desperately trying to reconstruct the path back to the car. But darkness and panic were potent disorienters. Every tree trunk seemed a mocking duplicate of the last. We crashed through the underbrush, unseen branches lashing our faces. Finn sobbed into my shoulder. I heard Lily's ragged gasps as Clara urged her onward. "There!" Clara cried, pointing. Ahead, a clearing emerged, bathed in moonlight, revealing a craggy outcrop of rock. "We can climb, up there." It was our sole prospect. We scrambled upward, rough stone abrading hands and knees. We had just crested the summit when a hulking shape exploded from the bordering trees. In the stark moonlight, our pursuer stood fully revealed. It possessed a wolf's outline, yet scaled to the size of a small bear, its fur matted, its fangs long and yellowed. But the eyes were the abyss. They held a chilling intelligence, almost human, yet consumed by a ravenous, malevolent hunger. It began to prowl the base of the outcrop, seeking purchase. We huddled, a knot of terror, watching helplessly as it commenced its ascent. "We're cornered," Clara whispered, her arms a vice around the children. My gaze swept our precarious perch, searching frantically for any advantage, any makeshift weapon. It landed on a loose boulder balanced near the precipice. "Clara, take the children. The far side," I instructed, moving toward the stone. "When I yell, make for the trees." "Elias, no." Her eyes dilated with understanding and horror. "It's the only way," I choked out. "Please, just be ready." The beast was halfway up, claws scrabbling, finding holds in the ancient rock. I braced myself behind the boulder, palms flat against its cool, uneven surface. Timing was paramount. As the creature hauled itself level with the top, a monstrous paw hooking over the edge, I threw my entire weight against the stone. It wobbled, a sickening pause hanging in the air. Then it began to cant forward, gathering momentum. "Now," I roared. Clara and the children scrambled down the opposite slope as the boulder plunged. The creature looked up, its intelligent eyes widening fractionally at the descending mass. A hideous yelp abruptly severed by a wet, bone-jarring crunch as the rock found its mark. I slid down the incline, heart lodged in my throat, sprinting towards the spot where my family had vanished into the woods. "Clara! Children! Here!" Clara's voice answered, thin but present. They materialized from behind a sentinel oak, faces spectral and trembling, but whole. We didn't pause to ascertain the creature's fate. Fueled by raw adrenaline and guided by the first faint traceries of dawn filtering through the canopy, we fled. By some miracle, we stumbled upon the trail leading back to our vehicle. As we sped away from that cursed place, the children swaddled in emergency blankets in the back seat. The immensity of the ordeal began to settle upon us. We had been hunted by something impossible, a figment torn from the deepest recesses of nightmare. We drove directly to the nearest ranger station, but our frantic narrative was met with polite disbelief. A search party was dispatched, yet they reported finding no trace of any monstrous entity, no tracks beyond the ordinary. Our shredded tent and the disarray of our campsite were the sole mute testaments to the night's horror. In the subsequent days and weeks, we grappled with the incomprehensible. I trawled the depths of the internet, seeking analogous accounts, any shred of explanation for the apparition we'd encountered. Legends surfaced, dogmen, skinwalkers, nameless things said to haunt the deep woods, but none precisely mirrored our experience. Sleep offered no sanctuary. The nightmares were relentless. I'd be back on that rocky platform, the boulder missing its mark, waking drenched in sweat, my hands flailing in the dark to confirm Clara and the children were truly beside me, safe. We never camped again. The children acquired a phobia of the dark that required years of patient therapy to soothe. The crucible of shared trauma tested Clara's and my bond, yet ultimately forged it stronger. Years have elapsed, but an instinctive glance over my shoulder persists whenever I find myself outdoors after dusk. Every shifting shadow seems pregnant with menace. Every rustle in the foliage triggers a cascade of remembered fear. I know now with chilling certainty that entities exist which defy rational explanation, horrors that prowl the liminal spaces, just beyond civilization's flickering lights. Sometimes, on still nights when the wind carries secrets, I fancy I hear a distant, mournful howl. It forces the question, was our ordeal an isolated anomaly, or do more such creatures dwell out there, concealed in the vast darkness, awaiting the next unsuspecting souls to trespass into their domain? Answers elude me, leaving only anxieties that gnaw at the edges of sleep. This much I understand. The next time you contemplate a wilderness sojourn, perhaps consider the well-trod paths, the crowded campgrounds, because deep in the woods where the shadows stretch long and the night reigns absolute, you cannot know what watches, patient and hungry, anticipating its moment. As for my family and me, our adventures are now confined to the comparative safety of our own backyard. Some frontiers, however beautiful, conceal risks too profound to court. We learned the hard way that sometimes when you venture too far into nature, ancient and savage, ventures back, with teeth bared and claws ready. That Saturday evening, wading through the detritus of lives lived and forgotten in my family's house, I found the notebook. The air hung thick, stagnant with the scent of trapped time, heavy in the stillness. A particular drawer in an old bureau, stiff with disuse, yielded under protest. I'd anticipated only dust motes dancing in the gloom, perhaps brittle, forgotten papers. Instead, nestled within, lay a small volume bound in unassuming leather. Scratches marred the cover like old scars, but otherwise, it offered no clue, no title, no initials, just the blank, worn hide. I riffled through its pages. Each one was utterly vacant, pristine, an unused thing. Without much consideration, I tossed it onto the kitchen table, a minor curiosity, perhaps destined for idle jottings. At that moment, the house held its breath, offering no hint of the strangeness coiled within the ordinary. My plan for it was mundane, fleeting. Later sunk into the living room's silence, punctuated only by the refrigerator's low thrum. A peculiar sound surfaced, a dry scraping noise like fingernails dragged across wood. I rose, investigating the kitchen. Nothing seemed amiss save for the notebook. It lay where I'd left it, yet the cover now gaped slightly, an invitation or a warning. My hand hovered above it, then brushed the leather. It was cold, unnaturally so, as if it had absorbed the chill of a tomb. Lifting it, I discerned a faint impression on the first leaf, thin as a spider's thread, like a hesitant pencil stroke, but I hadn't marked it. A smudge, perhaps. I closed the volume, the cold seeping into my fingertips, and returned it to the table before retreating upstairs to the familiar confines of my old bedroom. Not unease, not yet, just a ripple of the peculiar in the quiet dark. Around the stroke of midnight, a muffled thump resonated from below. My heart gave a painful lurch against my ribs. I'd been drifting on the ancient mattress, each shift accompanied by a chorus of protesting springs. Something dislodged from the counter, I reasoned groggily. Pushing myself up, I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and descended the stairs, each step amplifying the nervous tattoo in my chest. Then I saw it. The notebook lay splayed on the floorboards, a good 2 feet from the table's edge. Its cover was thrown wide, revealing the first page, no longer blank. Scrawled across it in messy, uneven strokes, dark as dried blood, were 3 words. My stomach clenched as I picked it up, the cold leather seeming to cling. It read, I watch in the dark. That was all. The script, whatever substance formed it, looked unnervingly fresh, barely dry. No explanation bloomed in the vacant space of my mind. I hadn't written it. The house held no one else. My first instinct screamed to hurl the thing into the bin, banish it. Yet a deeper, more treacherous curiosity stayed my hand. I needed to comprehend. With fingers that trembled slightly, I pressed the cover firmly shut, forcing slow, measured breaths against the rising panic. I placed it back on the table, its presence radiating a silent challenge. I stared, the fine hairs on my nape prickling, an undeniable sensation of being observed crawling over my skin. A swift turn revealed only the empty kitchen, the refrigerator's hum filling the void where footsteps should have been. Eventually, retreating upstairs seemed the only option. I left the lights blazing behind me. Sleep offered no refuge. Each time my eyelids drifted shut, a faint scratching intruded, the whisper of graphite on paper, perhaps, originating from nowhere and everywhere. I'd bolt upright, scanning the oppressive darkness, hearing only the frantic rhythm of my own breath. My chest felt constricted, imagination populating the corners with hunched, unseen forms. Once, the distinct creak of the bedroom door, easing open, sent me fumbling for the lamp switch. Illuminated, the door stood firmly closed, mocking my fear. After long stretches of brittle silence, exhaustion finally dragged me under. Dawn found me slick with sweat, the night's phantoms lingering. Downstairs, the notebook rested on the table, innocuously closed. I reached for it, intending to confront the previous night's inscription, but the page, like all the others, was blank, utterly smooth beneath my fingertips. No indentation, no residue, no ghost of the menacing words. A wave of dizziness washed over me. Had I dreamt it, hallucinated in the tired gloom? My mind, seeking refuge, clung to rationalization. I slid the notebook into a drawer, out of sight, and pushed open the back door, desperate for the clarifying sting of morning air. That afternoon, insidious creaks emanated from the vicinity of the living room closet, sounding unnervingly like pressure applied from within. I flung the door open to find only hanging coats and stacked boxes, dust motes swirling in the disturbed air. Moments later, a sharp slam echoed from the hallway. I hurried there to find the window shut tight, the latch secured. No breeze stirred the trees outside. I distinctly recalled leaving it open to ventilate the house's musty breath. A cold tension seized my muscles, that familiar tightness returning to my chest. The conviction solidified. I was not alone. My gaze darted involuntarily, searching shadows, expecting a flicker of movement, a coalescing shape. But each room remained stubbornly, unnervingly empty. My own footfalls were swallowed by the floorboards. As evening bled into the rooms, painting corners in shades of gray, I felt drawn back to the notebook, seated in the living room under the hesitant glow of a single lamp. The overhead fixture had developed an intermittent flicker that frayed my nerves. I retrieved it from the drawer. The instant my fingers contacted the leather, I knew something had changed. The pages felt subtly thicker, imbued with a strange density. Hesitantly, I began to turn them. Scattered across random leaves were new markings, cryptic symbols resembling no known script, fragmented phrases in a tongue I couldn't place, and stark, black lines that coalesced into shapes, suggesting watchful eyes. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. My mouth turned to dust. From the ceiling above came a low groan, the settling complaint of old timbers. I snapped the notebook shut, unable to bear the sight any longer. Perhaps an hour drifted by before a clatter erupted from the kitchen. I found a cabinet door swinging lazily open. Several plates lay scattered across the linoleum, miraculously intact, alongside a few cups that had rolled drunkenly aside. I recoiled, my hand finding the countertop, gripping it until my knuckles ached, and then I saw it, the notebook resting on the counter, though I'd left it in the living room drawer. No memory of moving it surfaced. My breath hitched, my chest feeling impossibly small. With a reluctance bordering on dread, I picked it up and opened it once more. A new message, stark and concise. Come to the stairs. A faint tingling radiated from my fingertips. A dull ache pulsed behind my eyes. Every rational part of me screamed to refuse, to flee. Yet my feet carried me towards the staircase, a puppet answering its strings. The stairwell yawned, a column of darkness untouched by the house's sparse lighting. I paused at the bottom step, listening. The silence pressed in, profound and suffocating, making my ears ring. One step, then another, the notebook clutched like a shield against my chest. The wood groaned under my weight. An overwhelming certainty washed over me. Something waited at the landing, something patient and unseen. But the compulsion to ascend was absolute. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against the silence. Reaching the top, the hallway light sputtered erratically. The door to the bedroom where I'd barely slept stood slightly ajar, leaking a sliver of darkness. A chill draft snaked around me, raising goosebumps. My eyes stung, dry and strained. From the shadows ahead came a soft, scuffling sound. Furniture shifting, a footstep. Hello? My voice emerged, a thin, reedy thing, swallowed by the oppressive quiet. No answer. I pushed into the room, flicked the switch. Empty. The bedsheets were a tangled mess. The closet door half open. A quick inspection revealed nothing but stale air that felt thick, heavy, like breathing through damp cloth. Back in the flickering hallway, I consulted the notebook again. The symbols seemed sharper now, the lines writhing with implied movement. I rubbed my eyes, blaming fatigue. Then, a soft, persistent scraping commenced near the attic hatch, directly above. My skin crawled. The thin panel in the ceiling felt miles away. I rarely ventured into the attic. There was no reason to now. Yet the sound persisted, insistent, the distinct rasp of nails on wood. Dragging a chair beneath the hatch, I used a broom handle to nudge it open. Dust rained down. A single, weak bulb cast feeble light on a landscape of forgotten boxes and shrouded shapes. The notebook in my hand felt distinctly warmer now, almost hot. I placed it carefully on the attic floor before hauling myself upwards, my jeans snagging on a splinter, nearly sending me tumbling back down. Standing amidst the clutter, I scanned the dim expanse. A whisper, faint as brushed silk, stirred the air by my ear, forming no discernible words. Crouching, I opened the notebook, turning to the final page. A new sentence materialized. You are close. My heart felt ready to detonate. I set the notebook aside, my gaze sweeping the dust-choked space. The single bulb illuminated cobwebs like macabre lace. A mirror, draped in a stained sheet, stood in one corner. Driven by an impulse I didn't understand, I pulled the sheet away, My reflection stared back, pale, eyes wide with strain. In the mirror's depths, the scratches on the notebook's cover seemed starker. A disquieting flicker of wrongness touched me. My reflection's movements seemed fractionally delayed, out of sync. Nerves, surely. I blinked hard, spun around, nothing but boxes and shadows. Snatching up the notebook, I scrambled back down, slamming the hatch shut, the echo of my pounding heart loud in my ears, my pulse throbbing in my throat. Retreating to the living room, I forced myself into a semblance of calm, throwing open windows to the encroaching twilight. The setting sun stretched long, distorted shadows across the floor. I sank onto the couch, the notebook heavy in my lap. Destroy it, burn it in the cold fireplace, or press onward. The hunger for answers, for understanding, warred with primal fear. What else might it reveal? One more night, I decided, just one. If the phenomena intensified, morning would see its destruction. As true darkness enveloped the house, the unsettling symphony began anew. Floorboards popped and groaned in distant rooms. Doors creaked open, then fell silent. The sharp rattle of a window pane echoed from the upstairs bathroom. Cold sweat traced paths down my sides. I crept upstairs to investigate, but as I reached the landing, the rattling ceased abruptly. The bathroom window was firmly shut. Back in the hall, the light flickered again. A nervous tick in the house's aging system, though the bulb itself appeared sound. Descending once more, I stopped dead. The notebook lay open on the living room table, pages exposed. I hadn't left it there, hadn't left it open. My throat constricted, my heart gave a heavy thud. In bold, black script, stark against the page, the truth is under the drawer. My mind leaped back, the bureau drawer where this nightmare began. A jolt of adrenaline, sharp and cold, shot through me. My palms grew slick. I had to know. I crossed to the bureau, wrenched the drawer free, and set it on the floor. Reaching into the dusty cavity behind it, my trembling fingers brushed against something thin, rectangular. I drew it out, a photograph. My father, younger, stood in this very room, holding a notebook identical to the one I now possessed. His expression, staring directly into the camera lens, was unreadable, grim. I flipped it over. A date, 30 years past. He'd never spoken of it, never hinted at such strangeness. A wave of nausea rolled through me. I placed the photo carefully on the desk, my gaze drawn back to the notebook. Its pages began to flutter, stirred by an invisible current. My pulse hammered against my ribs. New words bled onto the page. He knew. The realization struck with physical force. My father had walked this path, faced these same inexplicable terrors. Had he contained it somehow? Or had he intentionally left it here, a cursed inheritance? Tears pricked my eyes. I stumbled back, hands shaking violently, nearly dropping the malevolent object. The air grew thick, cloying, and a faint metallic tang coated my tongue. A low, dragging sound emanated from the direction of the front door. The knob rattled insistently. I froze, expecting the door to swing inward, but it remained shut, the tension stretching thin and sharp. Clutching the notebook, I held it poised above the empty trash can, my arm trembling, mind racing. Would disposal end this, or unleash something worse? My breath came in ragged gasps. Closing my eyes for a fleeting second, I looked down again. The script had shifted. Don't. My heart seemed to stutter. A shaky exhale escaped my lips. I lowered my arm, defeated, or perhaps ensnared. Some unseen force compelled me to keep it, to delve deeper. Flipping through the pages, my vision momentarily swam. When it cleared, stark images flooded my mind. Not memories, but vivid intrusions. Lightless corridors stretching into infinity, lined with elongated dancing shadows. They felt narrow, constricting. A high-pitched ringing filled my ears as my heart galloped. Then, as quickly as it came, the vision dissolved, leaving me back in the dimly lit living room, gripping the notebook so tightly my knuckles shone white. My shirt clung damply to my skin. My muscles screamed with tension. With a choked cry, I slammed the cover shut and locked the notebook away inside a small wooden chest tucked in the corner. The weight of fear settled heavy and suffocating. The house seemed to resume its furtive life. Floorboards sighing, settling. My head throbbed. Seeking refuge, I sat at the kitchen table, attempting to anchor myself in the present. The walls felt too close, the window panes vibrated faintly. My legs trembled, palms slick with sweat, but I just sat, focusing on the rhythm of my breath, the loud ticking of the wall clock measuring out the dread. Minutes crawled by. No new sounds intruded. Eventually, I rose and checked the chest. Silence. The notebook remained contained. I don't know what comes next. Destruction or further communion. What I've witnessed, what I've felt, cannot be dismissed. This house, this inherited space, pulses in response to the notebook's cryptic pronouncements. Doors slam, windows rattle, the attic breathes secrets, and unseen things stir at the edges of perception. I am torn. Some instinct screams that opening it again invites deeper, darker intrusions. Yet the need to understand what my father knew, what secret he guarded or bequeathed, burns fiercely. For now it remains locked away, a silent, potent weight in the corner. I wait, hoping for silence, bracing for more. The cold dread remains lodged in my chest, a constant companion. Part of me yearns for an end, any end. Another part, tethered to this unfolding mystery, cannot turn away. I am trapped with this volume that whispers truths I can no longer ignore. Finding my own answers, it seems, is the only path forward. Until then, I watch, I listen, and I keep the lights burning bright against the encroaching dark. "3 days into the void where Alara should have been, the phantom message materialized. I was marooned in the sterile chill of the precinct, adrift in a fog of sleeplessness and bureaucratic fluorescence when my phone vibrated against my thigh. Simple words glowed. "I'm all right. Don't fret." Yet a glacial dread didn't bloom from the sentiment, but from the sender, Ilara's number, the very device authorities swore lay shattered near her forsaken vehicle. My gaze locked onto the screen, tremors beginning in my fingertips. An impossibility. Ilara had evaporated en route from her office. Her car, discovered yawning open on a desolate highway shoulder, keys still waiting in the ignition, offered no narrative of violence, no clues suggesting abduction, just the hollow shell of the car and a fractured phone. Now this transmission from the impossible. "Everything okay, Mr. Davies?" Detective Harding's sharp tone sliced through my stupor. Her gaze, laced with professional concern, met mine. A difficult swallow scraped my raw throat. "A text," I managed, the words feeling alien. "It's from Ilara's number." Harding's sculpted eyebrows ascended, an expectant hand extended. I surrendered the phone. Her scrutiny narrowed as she absorbed the message. "Inconceivable," she breathed. "Her handset is secured in evidence." Yet the screen offered irrefutable proof, a whisper from beyond the wreckage. Chaos erupted in measured procedural steps. Tracing attempts dissolved into digital dead ends. Questions, sharp and repetitive, probed my sanity, hinting I might orchestrate this macabre theater. But I was adrift in the same sea of bewilderment, and the messages persisted, spectral fragments of connection. Thinking of you. Such profound darkness here. Find me, Liam. Each syllable tightened the knot of fear in my gut, deepening the labyrinth of terror and confusion. The constabulary hit a wall. My phone became a monitored artifact, traces deployed, every conceivable tactic exhausted. Still the texts emerged, punctual specters from Ilara's number, defying all attempts at localization. Sleep became a forgotten country. Food, an abstract concept. Existence contracted to the anticipation of that electronic chime, a Pavlovian torture oscillating between hope and dread. A week after the initial contact, a directive arrived, altering the trajectory of my despair, the place of our first kiss, midnight unaccompanied. Recognition flared instantly. The ancient sentinel oak in Meadowbrook Park, witness to our nascent affection. My pulse hammered against my ribs, rereading the command. This was it, the fragile promise of retrieval, of bringing Ilara back from the precipice. I withheld this from the police. Their intervention, I reasoned, could only obstruct, could frighten away the puppeteer pulling these strings. This pilgrimage demanded solitude. As midnight bled across the sky, I navigated the familiar paths towards the park. The air, cool and crystalline, hung beneath a luminous moon that sculpted long, disquieting shadows. Ahead, the great oak clawed at the star-dusted heavens with skeletal branches. I advanced with deliberate quiet, senses straining, scanning the oppressive stillness for Ilara, for anyone. Emptiness answered, profound and absolute. "Ilara?" My voice a tentative thread in the silence. "Are you here?" Nothing. My watch face glowed. 12:01 a.m. A sudden buzz from my pocket jolted me. Trembling fingers retrieved the device. "Look skyward." My breath hitched. Slowly, agonizingly, I tilted my head back, tracing the gnarled limbs above. Dangling from a low-hanging bough, impossibly, was a phone. Ilara's phone, the one supposedly locked away, irreparably broken. I reached, half convinced it would dissipate like smoke, but my fingers closed around solid, cold plastic. The screen, though webbed with cracks, flared to life. "Behind you." I spun, heart detonating against my sternum. Only vacant parkland stretched away, bathed in the moon's spectral wash. Another vibration. The phone in my hand pulsed again. "Not there, here." The words fractured logic. I pivoted once more, a frantic search for Ilara, for any anchor in this escalating madness. And then I saw it, a silhouette poised at the tree line's edge. Obscured by shadow, yet some primal instinct screamed her name. "Ilara!" The cry tore from me as I surged forward. "Ilara, is it you?" The figure remained static, unresponsive. Closer now, a dissonance registered. The proportions felt distorted. the head oddly large, the limbs elongated, unnatural. My sprint faltered, replaced by hesitant steps, confusion wrestling with burgeoning horror. Elara? I whispered the name, barely audible. Its head snapped upward at an angle that defied anatomy. Then it smiled, a vast, horrifying crescent splitting its face, revealing rows of needle-sharp, phosphorescent teeth. A strangled cry lodged in my throat as I stumbled back. This entity, this thing, it bore no resemblance to Elara. It wasn't human. My heel snagged a root. I crashed earthward, air exploding from my lungs. And I heard it, a sound forever seared into my memory. Laughter, thin, frigid, utterly devoid of humanity. Scrambling upright, I fled, propelled by a terror more profound than any I'd known. Behind me, the pursuit began, punctuated by that chilling, rising laughter. Bursting from the park onto the asphalt ribbon of the street, lungs screaming, legs churning like pistons, I didn't pause until the sanctuary of my apartment door slammed shut behind me. I collapsed against the wood, vibrating with uncontrollable shudders. Hours passed in hyper-vigilant stillness, every creak and groan of the building morphing into the imminent arrival of that thing. When dawn finally fractured the darkness, I contacted Detective Harding, spilling the night's impossible events. She listened, her tone patient, yet disbelief resonated beneath the professional courtesy. A subsequent search of the park yielded nothing. No anomalous tracks, no monstrous entity, no trace of Elara. The phone I'd clutched, the impossible artifact from the tree, had also dematerialized. Mr. Davies, Harding offered gently, perhaps you should consider speaking with a professional. The strain, Elara's absence. I'm not delusional. The denial erupted sharp and defensive. Yet, even as the words left my mouth, insidious doubt began its corrosive work. Had the pressure finally fractured my mind? Was it all a hallucination born of grief? That night, suspended in the limbo between wakefulness and exhaustion, staring into the oppressive darkness above my bed, my phone pulsed one final time. A leaden dread settled as I compelled myself to look. A picture message originating from Elara's number. My thumb hovered, quivering. Could I bear witness? A deep inhalation, a tap. The image resolved and the floor beneath me dissolved into an abyss. A selfie, Elara, radiant, beaming into the lens. But hovering behind her, captured in a mirrored surface, stood the creature from the park. Its grotesque rictus seemed aimed directly at me, one elongated, malformed arm draped possessively over Elara's shoulder. Below the image, a caption, "See you soon, Liam." Sleep is a luxury I no longer afford. My phone lies buried in landfill electronics. The landline is severed. Every reflective surface in my apartment is shrouded. Futile gestures, it's merely delaying the inevitable. Sometimes in the dead of night, I think I hear it, Elara's distinctive ringtone, emanating faintly from the distant trash heap, and occasionally catching my own reflection in a darkened window pane, or the surface of collected rainwater. I glimpse it. That inhuman smile, the glint of those teeth, the cold, dark eyes. What became of Elara, I cannot say. The nature of that entity, its desires, remain shrouded in terrifying mystery. I only know it persists, observing, patient, and its arrival is not a question of if, but when. So should you receive a message from a number long silenced from someone presumed lost, do not engage. Do not agree to meet. And whatever you value, never ever look behind you, because sometimes the one you yearn to rescue is irretrievably gone, and what has found you instead is infinitely worse. Even now the memory clings, that small stone visage, glimpsed for the first time. It was less a carving, more a suggestion hammered from raw rock. A rudimentary head, yet eyeless, noseless. Only a mouth existed, a thin, unwavering rictus, etched into the stone, radiating a disquiet I couldn't immediately place. A gift, ostensibly, something to be politely acknowledged, perhaps even chuckled at. But from the instant it occupied a space on my living room shelf, an insidious certainty grew. It watched. Devoid of eyes, it somehow stared. A feeling I tried to smother, but which persisted, a low hum beneath the surface of my days. My solitude occupies a modest one-bedroom flat. The living room, sparsely furnished with a couple of weary armchairs, a low table and a simple shelf unit for accumulated trifles, drinks light from a single street-facing window. Upon receiving the effigy, I'd thought little of it, assigning it a spot on the highest shelf, nudged against the spine of a forgotten paperback. Immediately, though, its posture snagged my attention, a distinct forward inclination, as if perpetually leaning out, craning to observe me from its perch. An imbalance in the carving, I reasoned, or perhaps the shelf itself listed slightly. A firm nudge confirmed its stability, and I turned back to the rhythm of my solitude. Later, bathed in the evening's artificial glow, I sat scrolling through my phone, my gaze snagged intermittently by the stone face. Each time I could have sworn its orientation had shifted, now leaning further forward, now canted a hair's breadth to the left. Imagination, my rational mind insisted, a frantic whisper against the rising tide of unease. I rose, crossed the room, meticulously straightened the object, returned to the couch. Minutes crawled by. A cold spider walk traced my forearms. I looked again. It had pivoted almost imperceptibly to the right, its blank front aimed squarely at me. My pulse quickened, a frantic bird trapped in my ribs, yet I clung to logic. Uneven floor, I muttered, the words tasting like ash. I fussed with it again, wedging a sliver of cardboard beneath its base, seeking stability where none felt inherent. Then, seeking refuge in distraction, I flicked on the television. Hours passed. Bedtime arrived. Nothing further occurred that night, yet the room felt shared, occupied by a silent, vigilant presence. Morning light revealed the statue facing outward, angled sharply from the wall, as if it had performed a slow pirouette while I slept. I stood blinking, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. No memory of leaving it so. Sleepwalking wasn't among my known habits. Lifting it, I felt its dense coolness, turned it over in my hand. My thumb traced the smooth curve of its mouth, that small, fixed grin that burrowed under my skin. Still just an oddity, a peculiar bit of craft. I returned it to the shelf, deliberately facing it forward, and tried to banish it from my thoughts. Preparing for work, leaving the apartment, a conscious effort to push the stone face into the mental background. Throughout the day, its image flickered at the edges of my concentration, but I wrestled it back, focusing on tasks, convincing myself I'd magnified trivialities. Just a lump of rock, nothing more. Yet a persistent urge surfaced. Dispose of it, leave it curbside, bury it in a box. Countering this was a vague sense of obligation to its giver. Perhaps just hiding it would suffice. The thought lingered, a potential compromise. That evening found me again before the television's flickering screen, the statue resolute on its shelf. A movie played, intended to soothe frayed nerves. During a lull, my eyes drifted towards it. The overhead light sculpted shadows around the mouth, deepening the impression of its grin. Then, or did I imagine it, a minute tremor, a fractional shift, like the intake of a shallow breath. My heart leaped, my stomach clenched. I stabbed at the volume remote, forcing my gaze away, back to the screen. My palms grew damp. I wiped them repeatedly on my trousers. The film lost all coherence. Giving up, I killed the television's glow and headed for the bedroom. Passing the shelf, I fought the urge to look. Failed. It seemed undeniably to be leaning towards my path of exit. My mouth was parchment dry. I quickened my pace, escaping the room. In bed, the image replayed, a trick of light, surely. I squeezed my eyes shut, commanding sleep. Sleep offered little sanctuary. I'd drift, only to jerk awake, convinced of a sound. A faint scraping, barely audible, easily dismissed as house settling or my own strained hearing. Each time my heart hammered against my ribs. Finally, unable to bear the tension, I rose and padded into the living room. Flipping the switch, I scanned the room. The statue remained on its shelf, yet closer to the edge. A prickle crawled across my skin. Swallowing hard, I picked it up, turned its featureless face firmly towards the wall. A test. If it faced outward again by morning, imagination could no longer be blamed. Back in bed, sleep remained elusive. Dawn broke. I went straight to the living room. The statue greeted me, facing forward once more, its blankness aimed into the room. A dizzying heat flushed the back of my neck. Was my mind fraying? I snatched it from the shelf, setting it squarely on the coffee table, determined to keep it under direct observation while I made coffee. My eyes darted towards it constantly. It remained inert, yet its presence felt like a weight in the air. Over the subsequent days, other subtler transformations began. The flat planes flanking the mouth, previously smooth, started exhibiting faint hairline fissures. Shallow initially, they deepened incrementally, etching delicate grooves precisely where eyes might form. I traced them with a fingertip, feeling the new roughness under my skin. Not imagination, the stone itself was changing. Perhaps cheap material cracking under stress, but the lines seemed too purposeful, curving just so, mimicking the contours of nascent orbits. Denial became increasingly difficult. At night, the soft, furtive scraping grew more frequent, its source stubbornly elusive. Sometimes I'd burst into the living room, flicking on the light, hoping to catch it mid-motion. It was always still, yet never quite as I remembered leaving it. Once tilted oddly upward, as if contemplating the ceiling. Another time, leaning so precariously forward, I marveled it hadn't fallen. My hands trembled whenever I felt compelled to reposition it, baffled by how solid stone could achieve such subtle, persistent mobility. One evening, the pressure in my chest became unbearable, a suffocating tightness. Pacing the confines of my living room, I threw open the window, gulping the cool night air, seeking relief. The statue sat on its shelf, its half-formed eye sockets seeming to track my restless movement. That grin looked wider now, stretched. I stared at it from across the room. Abruptly, a sibilant whisper materialized not in my ears, but inside my skull, a sharp, intrusive pressure. "Who's really looking at who?" it hissed. "And how much more are you willing to see?" I recoiled, stumbling back a step. My breath came in ragged gasps, hands shaking uncontrollably. Had I truly heard it, or was sanity finally slipping its moorings? I clamped my eyes shut, pressing palms to temples. The whisper did not repeat. When I opened my eyes, the statue's grin seemed sharper, the corners infinitesimally upturned, mocking my terror. Driven by a surge of desperate energy, I strode over, snatched it up, held its stony weight. The urge to hurl it through the open window was overwhelming. I pictured its trajectory, the satisfying shatter on the pavement below. But fear paralyzed me, leeching strength from my arms. I couldn't do it. Defeated, I placed it back on the shelf and retreated to the kitchen, splashing cold water on my face. The next few hours were spent in frantic distraction, music loud, pointless cleaning, deliberately ignoring the silent watcher. Yet every few minutes my gaze was drawn back. Trapped in my own home, the walls felt closer, the air thicker. That night, the whisper returned, fainter this time, a mere hiss at the edge of hearing as I brushed my teeth, making my ears ring. "Are you sure you're the one in control?" My toothbrush clattered against the sink. Heart pounding, I rinsed, fled the bathroom. Exhaustion warred with hypervigilance as I finally sought my bed. Thoughts churned, nerves raw. Darkness offered no peace. Every creak, every sigh of the building made me jump. Eventually, oblivion claimed me. Sometime deep in the night, a low, dragging scrape echoed from the hallway. My eyes snapped open, pulse frantic. Sitting bolt upright, I strained to listen. The scraping persisted, punctuated by a soft thump. Slipping out of bed, I crept towards the door, easing it open. The living room was dark, save for the weak sodium glow, filtering through the window, rendering furniture as indistinct silhouettes. The shelf was visible, but its topmost occupant was missing. I took hesitant steps into the room, floorboards groaning underfoot. My legs felt leaden, my breath hitched, and then I saw it. On the coffee table, turned to face the doorway I stood in, its incipient eye sockets aimed at my chest. The corners of its mouth seemed stretched into a triumphant smirk at my fear. My hand fumbled for the light switch. In the sudden glare, new details leaped out. The grooves suggesting eyes were deeper now, starker, looking poised to break open. My stomach twisted, sweat beaded on my forehead. Then I saw them. Faint scratches marring the polished wood of the coffee table, trailing from where the statue now sat. Evidence of its journey. Legs trembling, I sank onto the couch, trying to absorb the impossible reality. It had moved. It had left physical traces. Its very form was altering. Tentatively, I picked it up again. This time, pressing my fingers into the eye grooves, I felt their rough, jagged edges like fresh wounds in the stone. A peculiar warmth radiated from them, not heat exactly, but a faint, unsettling thrum, a disturbing semblance of life that made my heart hammer harder. I caught myself muttering aloud nonsensical fragments. Not possible, just tired. I set the statue down beside me on the couch cushion, watching it intently, waiting. Nothing. After a long minute, I stood, resolved. It couldn't stay here. I carried it into the hallway, opened the closet, and placed it on the highest shelf, tucked behind a pair of old boots. I shut the door firmly. My hands still shook, but closing that door brought a sliver of fragile relief. Returning to the living room, I stood listening. Silence. No scraping, no hissing. The quiet offered a small measure of calm. I decided to stay awake on the couch, just in case. The night bled slowly towards dawn. I watched the clock, ears straining, utter stillness. Around 4, exhaustion won, and I drifted into a fitful sleep on the couch, unwilling to leave the living room unguarded. I woke near 7, neck stiff, the statue instantly filling my thoughts. Scrambling up, I hurried to the closet. The door remained shut. Heart pounding, I turned the knob, pulled it open. The stone face was there, exactly where I'd left it. Relief washed over me, potent but incomplete, tainted by a lingering sense of wrongness in the air. For several days it remained entombed in the closet, yet each night brought the faint, ghostly scraping from the hallway. Earplugs muffled the sound, but not the unsettling vibrations, the intuitive sense of something moving nearby. My nerves frayed further. Every unexpected noise made me flinch. Checking on the statue became a morbid ritual. The lines on its face seemed undeniably deeper each time, the edges around the eye grooves crumbling slightly, as if being patiently excavated from within. The grin, too, seemed wider, more malevolent. Coming home from work started to feel like entering hostile territory. The apartment air felt thick, oppressive. I lingered late at the office, sought refuge at friends' houses, delaying the inevitable return. But avoidance was temporary. Each time I crossed my threshold, I felt its presence, an invisible weight, even hidden from sight. The memory of the internal whisper echoed, a persistent pressure against the walls of my mind, demanding attention. One evening, I discovered them, new scratches on the hallway wall, mere inches above the baseboard, faint parallel lines trailing from the closet door towards the living room. My breath hitched. Frantically, I tried rubbing them away, but they were etched into the paint, shallow but undeniable grooves. My hands trembled at the implication. The statue dragging itself along the floor, scraping against the wall in the dark. I retreated to the couch, sinking into the cushions, trying to think. The familiar pressure built inside my head, the precursor to the whisper. My mouth went dry, my hands clenched into useless fists. Throw it out? The thought brought a fresh wave of fear. What if that worsened things? What if it returned? I sat there, legs shaking, mind racing, paralyzed by indecision and a growing dread. The presence of that thing felt more potent, more permanent than any action I could conceive. For now it resided in the closet's darkness, waiting, its half-formed eyes staring blindly outward, and I remained in my living room, staring at the closed door, each breath a heavy thump against my ribs.